This is a pre-departure video for the 2014 University of Southern Maine Vietnam Study Tour. The class is MBA 612 and the date is May 4th, 2014. The purpose of this project was to calculate the carbon footprint of my travel to and from Vietnam. I also looked into what I can do to mitigate these impacts. The calculator that I used was on www.carbonfootprint.com. I used this site because it received good reviews online and seemed like a credible source. The first step in my trip is to get my 8-year-old black lab Jack to my mom's house in Warner, New Hampshire for the duration. I will be driving my 2013 Jeep Wrangler from Portland, Maine to Warner, New Hampshire. It's approximately 126 miles and will be 0.06 metric tons of carbon. Next, I will be traveling from Warner, New Hampshire to Logan Airport. I will be taking, again, my Jeep Wrangler from Warner, New Hampshire to Concord, New Hampshire, where I will be getting a coach bus to Logan Airport. The impacts from my car ride from Warner to Concord are 0.01 metric tons of carbon. From Concord to Boston is 0.005 metric tons of carbon. This number is the total impacts of the bus divided by 40, because I am making the assumption there are 40 passengers on this bus. This brings my cumulative total carbon impact to 0.0705 metric tons. I will be meeting up with the rest of the group at Logan Airport. The flight is Japan Airlines, and it will be departing from Boston, bouncing in Tokyo, and finally landing in Ho Chi Minh City. I'm making the assumption there will be approximately 210 people on this plane. That's a total of 0.0062 metric tons of carbon. The next step in our trip is when we land at Ho Chi Minh Airport. We will be taking a city bus from the airport to the hotel. My calculation is that will be 0.0005 metric tons of carbon. That's assuming 20 passengers on the city bus. We will be spending a couple days in Ho Chi Minh City, traveling around and visiting businesses. The next step in our trip is to travel from Ho Chi Minh City to Da Nang. So the next leg that I've calculated was the city bus from the hotel back to the Ho Chi Minh City Airport. Again, this is 0.0005 metric tons of carbon, and I again assume there's 20 passengers on the bus. This leg brings my cumulative carbon impact total up to 0.0777 metric tons. We will be taking a flight from the Ho Chi Minh City Airport to Da Nang. I made the assumption that this is going to be a smaller plane than the one we took from Boston to Ho Chi Minh. Made the assumption there will be 75 passengers on the flight. That works out to a total of 0.0008 metric tons of carbon. This brings my cumulative total up to 0.0785 metric tons of carbon. When we get to Da Nang, that'll be exactly the midpoint of our trip as it pertains to our travel. This slide summarizes the return trip and the total impact of my travel to and from Vietnam. From Da Nang back to Ho Chi Minh City, I made the same assumptions on the plane, and it's the same mileage, so the carbon impact is again 0.008 metric tons. We'll be spending a couple more days in Ho Chi Minh City, so I calculated the impact of our trip to and from the airport in a city bus back to our hotel. That will be 0.0010 metric tons. The next leg will be the flight from Ho Chi Minh City back to Boston's Logan Airport, 0.0062 metric tons of carbon. Then I'll have my trip back to Warner, New Hampshire. Part of that trip will be in a coach bus from Logan to Concord, New Hampshire. And then the remainder will be in my Jeep. That will be 0.0105 metric tons. From Warner, New Hampshire to Portland, Maine, in my Jeep will be 0.06 metric tons of carbon. The total carbon impact of the return trip is the same as the trip over, 0.0785 metric tons. That brings the total impact of my travel to 0.1571 metric tons of carbon. The next thing I looked at are the activities that I'm going to do to offset my impact of my trip to Vietnam. The first thing I'm planning to do this summer is to ride my road bike at least 2 times to work and back. That will be a total of 100 miles. It's 50 miles round trip to work, and that will save about 0.04 metric tons. The next thing I'm going to do is put my new motorcycle license to use and borrow my neighbor's motorcycle for 1 week of commuting. Total will be 250 miles, and the savings is the net difference between the Jeep carbon footprint and the motorcycle footprint. That'll be about 0.01 metric tons a day over the course of 5 days. The total savings will be 0.05 metric tons. When I get home from the trip, I'm going to plant my vegetable garden to save me buying vegetables from the grocery store. Total savings of that will be 0.02 metric tons of carbon. The last thing I plan to do is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and that's sign up for Garbage to Garden and compost all of my organic waste. The savings of that is going to be 0.17 metric tons. The total offset that I'm anticipating is 0.28 metric tons. That's over my calculated impact of the trip of 0.1571 metric tons of carbon. The last thing I would like to discuss are the things that I already know about Vietnam and the things that I'm hoping to learn in my travel. The things I already know are very high level and very broad brushed. I have some understanding of the culture, the climate, the history, and a little bit about the international relations based on the assigned reading that we've had to date. At the end of May, I would love to come home with a more in-depth understanding of all of those things. I would also like to better understand the relationship that United States and Vietnam have in the business world. I'm hoping that at the end of this trip, I will have some ideas and some better perspective on possibly some ways to make this relationship better in the future.